Greetings, true believers. It's your old pal Spider-Man. Good morning, cadre. It's KJ. Today I'm gonna do a basic DE tutorial. Just kind of real basic. I'll get into more specifics later in future tutorials. But we had a question from Maximo77 on the forums yesterday about how to start off. He was getting some irritation, getting some not so good shaves. So I kind of wanted to go over what I do as part of my daily routine, and just kind of walk you through some of the steps if you're a new wet shaver on what you're going to want to do. So first of all, pre-shave. The only thing I do for pre-shave is take a hot shower. Hot shower, good bar soap or some sort of moisturizing face wash if you've got that. And then as soon as you get out of the shower, you want to go right into the shave. You don't want to give your face time to dry out. You want all that moisture to stay in your skin and in your whiskers as much as possible before you start your shave. I recommend getting either a synthetic brush or a Badger brush. When you're first starting out, synthetics are going to be much cheaper, and they're pretty easy to find. The synthetics nowadays are awesome. So get yourself a synthetic, or if you've got a Badger brush, whatever. Either will work. Soaps. So today I'm going to be using Honeybee Soaps Vetiver. Got this in a kind of a surprise piff. Well, he actually called it a gift from Doug from the forum, D. Keister. Sent me some soaps yesterday, so really appreciate that. I'm a big fan of Honeybee Soaps. As you know, you can't get them anymore. They're not being made. And Vetiver is a scent that I have not had of Honeybee Soaps, and it's amazing. It reminds me of the Jekyll and Hyde, especially the Jekyll, the greener version. It reminds me of that. This is a very, very good Vetiver. So if you are just starting out with soaps, there's multiple different categories of soaps, but I'm going to break this down into hard soaps and soft soaps. So if you've got a hard soap, like this is a glycerin-based soap. This is a harder soap. Tabic is going to be a harder soap. That's a triple milled. Mitchell's Wolfat, Williams, those are all hard pucks. You press on them, you're not going to put your finger in them. You want to bloom those, which I just did, and I dumped off. So blooming just means putting some water on the surface of the soap, letting it sit for 10 minutes or so. Let the surface of that soap absorb some of that water. That's going to make loading easier. Loading a little bit quicker, you're going to get more soap, you're going to get a better lather. So then I just dump off that bloom water into a bowl, which I'll use later because there's some good soap in there, so why waste it? So I'll use that to put back into my brush later. So then you want to pre-wet your brush, which if you've got a synthetic, all you gotta do is run it under water, it's good to go. If you got a Badger brush, you're gonna want to let that soak for about 30 seconds to a minute. Boar brushes, if you're using one of those, you're gonna want to let that soak for a couple of minutes to get the water into the bristles. You can use a boar brush if you want. I wouldn't really recommend them for a beginner, but you can if you want. My preference for somebody starting out is synthetic. I think they're amazing. So then what you want to do, take your brush and run it on the puck for at least 30 seconds. Depending on the soap, if you've got a softer soap, it's going to load faster. If you've got a harder soap, you're going to want to get more on it. So I need some more water to get this going. So depending on your soap, you're going to have different load times. Like I said, if it's a softer soap, it's going to pick up quicker. Glycerins, the melt and pour soaps, those are some of the cheaper ones, but they're a little bit trickier to use, but most soaps are going to work just fine. All right. Once you've got it in your brush, now I find face lathering to be the easiest method. You can bowl lather, so instead of once you load it, put it in a bowl, swirl it around, add some water until you get the lather you want. I like to do it on my face because then I can feel the lather and know when it's right for me. So I can tell you right now, I would like to have more lather going on than I've got right now. For some reason, this is taking me longer to load, but this is a brand new puck. I did bloom it, but it probably could have stood to be bloomed a bit longer. So the way I add water into my brush is, as I'm face lathering, you can see I'm kind of splaying this out a little bit as I'm doing that. Well, now I've got a little pocket right there. So I'm just going to pick some water up from the tap and let it drip. And just put a couple of drops in there at a time. Personally, I don't like dipping my tips into the water because I don't know exactly how much I'm getting. So I'm just gonna drip a couple of drops in there at a time until I get the moisture layer the way I want and the thickness of the lather the way I want. Now, there are a lot of soaps out there that do have oils and stuff in them that can be irritating. So if you've got a soap that's causing irritation, try something else. Everybody's sensitive to different scents, different oils. If you're just starting out, one of the best soap makers that's budget friendly and really easy to use is Sterling. Highly recommend. They have tons and tons of scents, so you're guaranteed to find something that you like scent wise, and they're really slick, really good, just a good overall soap to use. So I'm going to be using my Merkur 34C. Just loaded this up with a brand new Personna blade. So what you want to do is you want to have a loose grip. You want to hold it by the end, usually by somewhere around the ball end. And what you're going to do to start shaving is you're going to put the cap against your face and you're going to rotate it down until the blade just makes contact. And then you're going to let it drop down. Now you want to let the weight of the razor do most of the work. So that's why, now I've developed my own technique, and I personally hold razors up here. That's just the way I do it, but for starting out, you want to hold it down at the bottom. Again, put it against your face, rotate it down until the blade just makes contact, and then I'm not even putting any pressure on my face. I'm just letting the razor kind of fall down. So let the weight of the razor do most of the work. Now when you get that optimal angle of when that blade starts cutting, that's where you want to hold it. So it's not cutting here, it's 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 not cutting there. So depending on the razor and the geometry of the head, some of them have a much wider range of while it's cutting, and you can kind of adjust the aggressiveness that way. So one thing that can kind of help with irritation is what's called riding the cap. So you basically want to hold it at the angle that's the very first time that the blade is making contact. You don't want to hold it here. You want to ride the cap, which is the cap is the top part here. So the cap in contact with your face as much as possible, but the blade just being in contact. And that will provide a much milder shave. You don't need to use any pressure. But you just want to focus on maintaining that angle. Now, where it gets tricky is the transition between the flat side of your face and the jawline. So, you know, your neck is pretty straightforward. So if you're just coming in and getting your neck, that's all straight. But you got this transition zone. So it's one of the hardest areas to do because you got to change the angle. So it's not just holding it and letting it drag down. You have to maintain this angle along your face. So as you come down, you got to change it. You got to try to maintain that same angle with your skin, but you're going around a corner. So, and you can see I'm adjusting the muscles in my face. I'm trying to pull my skin tight. So, and one thing, like doing your chin, so like this is the bottom of the chin, but if I do this, now I've turned a corner into more of a flat area. So by face stretching, you can kind of turn some of those corners into flatter areas and make them a little bit easier to do. Or you can actually like pull your face and pull the skin. Now, if you're a brand new DE shaver, stop right now. Do one pass. It's not going to be as close, but you're going to have much less chance of getting irritation that way. If you've done that for a while and you've got a little bit of experience and you think you can go further, then we're going to do a second pass. Now this one was called a with the grain pass. The majority of the hairs on my face are growing downward, especially on the cheeks. The stuff on my chin is growing sideways actually. So you can map the hairs on your face by just feeling the grain, just rubbing and feeling. Like I know I'm going against the grain because I feel resistance. I'm going with the grain because there's no resistance. But on my chin, that resistance is side to side. So I'm against the grain right now. I'm with the grain here. This is technically across the grain. And that's the same way over here. This is against the grain this way, with the grain. But up here, this is against the grain. This is with the grain. But the majority of my face with the grain is in the downward pass. So my first pass is always straight down, and that's what most people do for their first pass, is just a straight down pass. Now, if you're relathering for your second pass, your brush has been sitting out. It's dried out a little bit, so you're going to probably want to add more water at this point. You may not feel a difference, but I guarantee, unless you are in a very, very humid place, it is dried out enough to affect it at least a little bit. And usually you want to err on the side of your lather being a bit too wet than a bit too dry. All right, so again, just holding it at the very end. It's a little bit trickier doing it across the green because you kind of have to have, you can't let the gravity just let it rest against your face as much, because you still gotta apply just enough pressure to keep it in contact with your skin. But you're not pushing it into your skin. So there's a little bit of pressure there, but barely. Now when I do my across the grain, I typically just start right at the nose line and go one way, so it's called like a nose to ear pass, or this would be an ear to nose pass. So I generally do one or the other, ear to nose or nose to ear. And then if I want to do a third pass, I'll go in with another across the grain and do whatever one I didn't do first. Now, as I mentioned in the thread, personally, I don't think blade choice really makes a whole lot of difference, especially when you're first starting out. I don't recommend changing your blade to different brands while you're shaving. You know, maybe you've got one that's irritating you, you think it's a bit too sharp or it's not smooth enough. If you think that's the problem, change it to a different one and see if you get different results. If not, it could be your technique, it could be your razor, but I don't recommend changing a lot. You want to focus on your technique, you want to focus on no pressure, and you want to focus on getting the proper angle. And when you're getting good shaves from that, you want to just keep it up and build the muscle memory. It took me 6 months to build the muscle memory to be able to shave basically on autopilot without having to think about my angle. Because what happens is when you first start out, you're really focused on your technique. And probably within a short period of time, you're going to start getting good shaves and it's going to work really, really well. And then a couple months in or a month in, your shaves are going to start to drop off and they're not going to be as good. And what happens is you get complacent, you forget about technique, you're like, oh, this is easy, and I'm getting good results. And so you start going off of what you think is autopilot, but you still have not built up the muscle memory. You think you have, but you haven't. And your technique is going to slip, your angle's going to change, you're going to start adding pressure, and all of a sudden it's not going to work. And when that happens, you just need to refocus, get back to basics, focus on pressure, focus on angle, and you'll get back on track. And that happened to me, happens to all of us. Once you get back on track, you realize, oh, yep, I did change what I was doing. And get back in the game and build up the muscle memory so that eventually it just becomes second nature. Okay, so when I'm finished with my shave, I always follow up with witch hazel, completely optional. Some people think there's no benefit to witch hazel at all. I like it, so I use it. But then you want to go to an aftershave splash or an aftershave balm, something that's going to help heal your face. I personally prefer splashes. In the wintertime, sometimes I'll use a balm if I think my skin needs a little bit of extra moisture, extra healing. So I keep some balms on hand up there. And then any extra aftershave, I just rub it all over. But that is my shave. That's the basics of a DE shave. Like I said, I'll do future tutorials where I spend more time talking about each individual aspect of it. But that's the basics. That's what I do. I think I went through everything that I've already covered in the thread. I just wanted to put it on video, get it out there so you could actually see what I was doing. You know, get an idea for what we're talking about with like riding the cap and angle and pressure and what it actually looks like when you're doing it. So hope this was helpful, and we'll see you guys on the forums later.